Marta, it is so lovely to see you on our big screen. And obviously, you were in the middle of this crazy ride of making Critical Zones into a digital experience. So it makes a huge difference to think of an exhibition in a virtual space rather than a physical space. Maybe you can start this virtual guided tour with a curatorial perspective on the differences and what it meant to you.
Yes, thank you. I'm really happy to, of course, I'm happy to be here and at the same time sad not to be here. I just have to say that Bruno was interrupted by we could hear the cricket. We might hear all of the people applauding for the health keepers behind us because it's 8:02 and so that's going to start fairly soon. So that's just as a sort of side note. But yeah, no, that's sure that as for the online exhibition, we were pretty happy to be dealing with a critical zone, which is a spatial concept, which is about how are we supposed to be placed on Earth. And so it was pretty great for us to deal with a spatial concept within a physical space. And then, of course, the challenge that we had came here and came as a sort of paradox, which is like, how do you talk about a different way of placing your body within an online network, of course, but so I think it's an immense luck that we could explore that paradox a little bit, and so maybe what I can do. I know that there were already 2 tours, so hopefully the platform is not going to show us all the time the same work as the one which were shown yesterday. But the first thing you can see is that we just passed the night hour. Maybe 10 minutes ago, it was with the light gray, and now the color of typography and the color of the background has changed. And as you scroll down here, you discover what is the critical zone about. Again, this thin biofilm which contains us, which contains all of the forms of life as we know them, and which was so beautifully described by Jérôme right now. And you can see that here, one of the big challenges that we had, which was that how do you give this sensation? How do you transcribe some of the important elements of the critical zone within let's say, a graphic mode, within a design way, which would make sense? And so there, the designer had that very interesting idea of creating kind of like shallow depth with the parallax. So you can see that you have the impression that there is this kind of thin layer, which is not so distant, but still gives you like an impression of depth, again, with this idea that we're contained within this membrane of 1 kilometer above our head, 1 kilometer under our feet. So that's the first thing. And then there's another point, which is pretty important here, which is the navigation menu that you can see here. And that was a way here you can choose the path that you want, and you have various kind of keywords, which came about, pretty much we choose them because they came into our discussion on the fairly regular level as we're discussing the show. And so, for example, you could start here with the question of landscape, which I know that Joseph Karlsruhe gave a very important lecture about it. And as you would scroll down, you could see different artworks which all kind of deal with these notions of landscape, but in connection to the critical zone. And each of these artworks also have other tagging systems, which means that they are going to reconnect to other artworks and the different texts in a very dynamic manner. And also, of course, we didn't want to create a simply, let's say, a kind of distinction between the various elements which are important within the website. There's one element which is very important, which is the spectators, or the viewers, rather. The viewers themselves are going to influence the order in which the work's order is going to get into reconfiguration. It's the viewers, the spectators are they will leave a trace within the exhibition, because as they click on the work, some works will become, let's say, more prominent than others, etc. Always in this kind of generative format, which we thought was pretty well going with this idea of like reconfiguration, co-entanglement, and kind of like codependence, which are all key elements of the critical zone. So Maybe we can start with this work from forensic architecture. Yesterday, we had the chance of having Eyal Weizman here as part of the discussion. And so as you go onto the page here, you can see that you're going to have a screen with different elements, and there forensic architecture is working with the notion of the cloud dispersion, pretty much how we have some sort of like cloud dispersions and intoxications of the air, which are themselves in various places around the world, like how these kind of instances are kind of creating what reminds us Sloterdijk when he's talking about atmoterrorism. And for us, of course, it was interesting to talk about clouds because there's first of all like a sort of a very obvious link with the fact that we very often talk about the online cloud as a sort of metaphor. But here, what forensic architecture is doing is like in a way, they're bringing us down to earth by talking about these kind of moments of toxicity of the clouds in very different contexts. And here you can see, as you arrive onto the website, you can see you have a sort of menu of different molecules. And so the first molecules is about cement and cloud dispersions. And I will play the little clip, which is a sort of mini documentary that they do, which is exploring the connection between, let's say, explosions of how explosions disperse elements of cement.
In 2008, Israel launched a bombing campaign in the Gaza Strip. Speaking to us on the phone, a Gazan resident described the scene of his neighborhood turning into a cloud of dust. While coughing, he explained that he was breathing in his home. Bomb clouds contain everything that a building once was: cement, plaster, plastic, glass, timber, fabric, paperwork, medicines, sometimes parts of human bodies. Bomb clouds are architecture in gaseous form, changing from columns to mushrooms before dissipating into the atmosphere. In 2014, Israel began using aerial crop dusters to spray a toxic herbicide mix of glyphosate, oxyflorphane, and diuron along the eastern perimeter of occupied Gaza. It did so in the morning hours, when easterly winds carried the toxic clouds deep onto Gazan territory, destroying Palestinian crops and livelihoods. Together with local farmers and human rights groups, we collected samples of affected leaves. We used motion tracking to model the path of the planes.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I hear that there was a small problem with the sound, but pretty much I will come back very briefly on the fact that what they did here is like a series of small documentaries which are taking one similar form, which are clouds, dispersions, and yet seeing how very different chemicals kind of affect the critical zone. And of course, the whole point is like they're working with kind of very controversial cases and seeing how, in one way, cement dispersions can, affect a certain zone, while how glyphosate, let's say, which would be spread in Gaza, would be used by the Israeli forces as they're dispersed over plain in order to kind of eradicate some sort of some agricultural places and displace the workers who live onto, or whose living depends upon the cultivation of those zones. So again, like for us, it was a very important thing to start the kind of online exhibition with those sort of contested zones, with these moments where part of the atmosphere would become a very colonized space. And of course, there's something very important to say about forensic architecture, is that there's the way that they work pretty much is like they are, as Eyal Weizmann was explaining yesterday, they are an agency working with architectural means, where like they work on human rights violation with and on behalf of the communities affected by political violence. So that's a very important point, which like they don't just come to speak about, they are very involved and they are commissioned those different pieces from, let's say, the ground, from the contested ground where these issues are arising. And recently, they've been turning to kind of like environmentalist and justice groups with the Center of Contemporary Nature, which is pretty much why we decided that it was so important that we would bring them into the space so that they would, of the exhibition, both online and physically, so that we would explore the kind of very specific architecture that is which is presented to us with those clouds. So this is one of the examples which was important for us. Maybe I can take another case which for us was pretty important, which is this work by the artist Semenelesai Dekival, who's an Aborigines artist based in the south of Taiwan from the Taiwan tribe. And he makes those very interesting drawings where you have these kind of shapes, pretty much those linear shapes, which are very confident lines, as if he also carves a lot of wood. So I guess he got this kind of craft about making the very, very smooth and detailed lines of bizarre creatures with those very, repetitive patterns. And those creatures don't really look friendly. They would look kind of scary. And the story behind these drawings is that pretty much about 4 years ago, Senembai went into the forest with some children from his village, and they were kind of attacked by a sort of bug. And so he started to imagine, they could not see it. They could imagine it, but not see it. And so he started to try to give it a shape. And as I came 4 years later into his studio in the south of Taiwan, that was the exact beginning of the pandemic. And so he wanted to show them to me by showing this moment when you would have, let's say, the environment which kind of strike back, like what happens when you enter into a forest and that the forest strike back because there was a sort of invasion to it and it feels the need to defend itself. And so, of course, like in the context of the corona, we thought that it would be interesting to put this kind of like intruders, which literally, the virus acted as a sort of paralyzer. It paralyzed our entire activity. And so we thought that it would be interesting to have it, both because the virus is the reason why we have this online exhibition, but also because the practice of this artist really reflects something which is interesting in Gaia, which is the role of bacteria, which has been discussed quite beautifully by Jérôme earlier in his talk. The fact that the bacteria, pretty much as Lynn Margulis was saying, they run the show. Like they interact with the minerals, they interact with the environment, they completely shape it. So for us, it was a fairly important aspect that we wanted to explore. But there is something else which, in the show that we wanted to go with is like, we didn't want to just to, let's say, broadcast forms of knowledge. And yesterday, Peter Weibel talked a lot about the fact that an exhibition like that, which is online, allows to kind of send out various kind of messages in a much broader context. But we don't want to be only sending a message. We also wanted to kind of collect information from this very exceptional situation. We wanted to collect people's description. How could they describe the situation in which we are? What has the pandemic changed into their life? And so pretty much what we created with the Media Lab of Sciences Po and a collective called the Consortium is a website like this, which a website like this. Attends. Yes. Okay.
Martin, in case you're wondering whether the questionnaire is loading, it works beautifully. I just very quickly wanted to say that we are closing quite soon, so you have another 3 minutes, which works really well for the questionnaire. So do take us on to the adventure of the questionnaire.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, Barbara. So the whole point with this questionnaire is like, it's going to ask you like a set of questions, which are very, let's say, starting from your personal experience, where we're going to ask people pretty much what did the pandemic change into their life, and most importantly, what are the activities that they would like to see stopped after the pandemic? What are the activities that they would like to see developed? And pretty much to engage not only into some sort of like wishful thinking where they would gather their kind of opinions, but really to try to explore what makes this proposition, more coherent within their life, but also what kind of impact it would have onto others people's life. And so really like we want to encourage you to have a look at it in order to not only, to kind of have these moments of self-description in order to kind of get an agenda of where we want to go after this kind of COVID crisis. So this is again, like, thank you to ZKM for its amazing team for setting up the entire project. We have to thank, of course, the Bettina Corrintenberg and the curatorial team who did it. We have to, the nice thing with a questionnaire like that is like you have a small generic at the end that you can play where you can see all of the people who got involved and allowed this thing to happen. Again, thank you.
And thank you, Martin, for this wonderful guided tour through the digital exhibition, which you just finished beautifully on time. So well done for that. And also, it's nice that you stopped with the questionnaire, because this is a nice opportunity to just point out that we're hosting workshops, the ZKM together with the Media Lab de la Sciences Po Paris and the collective Où Atterrir. So we've been working together on this concept for the past 3 weeks, also together with Mira Hiltz and Michael Rüberkopf and Alexandra Herrmann and Sohail Hajmibauer and everybody. So it was a very interesting collaboration. And those workshops, you can actually then go on the site of the questionnaire and sign up for the workshops after or with taking the questionnaire. Another thing that I wanted to point out, I wanted to credit the graphic designers who were part of the adventure, this crazy adventure of setting up the digital exhibition Critical Zones. The graphic designers from Operative Space, Robert Preusse and Stefanie Rau, they did an incredible job, and it was such an interesting collaboration, not only between the ZKM and all the artists and the curators involved, also the ZKM departments, the museum communication, the curators, and it was just such a nice venture to go on together with the IFKM and Operative Space. So really so many people, and thank you for pointing out the generic, dear Martin. Ika, we are now going to head out to another 5-minute technical break before after that coming back for a round of panel discussion. Martin, thank you so much again. Ika, your cue in German.
Ja, auch von mir ein großes Danke, Martin. Die virtuelle Plattform wird wachsen. Sie wird sich weiterentwickeln im Laufe des Jahres. Sie wird die physische Ausstellung permanent begleiten. Insofern bleibt dran. Wir haben da viel Arbeit investiert. Es ist tatsächlich für uns eine neue Möglichkeit, eine Ausstellung auf eine andere Art und Weise zugänglich zu machen. Und wir möchten natürlich auch von euch erfahren, wie gut das funktioniert. Insofern schreibt uns, das ZKM ist unter vielen Adressen zu erreichen. Wir freuen uns auf alle Beiträge tatsächlich. Genau, ein großer Dank, das wurde gerade eben schon gesagt, nochmal auch an die Grafiker aus Berlin, Stefanie Rau und Robert Preusse, die tatsächlich auch die sehr immersive Erscheinung, wenn man so sagen will, tatsächlich auch einfach möglich gemacht haben. Genau, bevor es jetzt zum zweiten Teil der Podiumsdiskussionen geht mit den Referenten Dispesh Chakrabarti, Emmanuel Kotscher und Vincent Desprez, machen wir eine kurze 5-minütige Pause für einen technischen Umbau und sind gleich wieder für euch da.